Hello. Let's see. Let me get this ready. Hope everyone in the States had a good Thanksgiving break. Or at least, if not in the United States, maybe you had a good few days off. Let's see. Alright, let's give a couple minutes for everyone to get in. We have another jam-packed session today, so pretty excited. Hey, how's it going? I just saw your Discord message. I was about to respond. I will respond in the Discord, but I can also just respond here. I don't. I think the stream last Wednesday either I don't remember. Might have been a mistake, or just did office hours. But yeah, the usual times are Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4:30 p.m. EST, which I know is like really late for most people. So I'm really sorry about that. I appreciate you joining here today, though, even though it is really late. We do have a YouTube channel where all the recordings are uploaded, which I know is that's not as quite as fun as seeing the live stream. But if you do miss any sessions, you're more than welcome to use the YouTube command to get the link to the YouTube. We might do an alternate schedule at some point, but that would mean the class would have to not start over, but it would be like a different session. Like it would be a whole other cohort at a different time. So you're more than welcome to wait for that, but I just don't know. I don't have any immediate plans for that right now. Maybe sometime in 2023. Hey everyone, good to see y'all. Yeah, I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving break if you're in the States. I'm gonna go ahead and get my slides set up. All right. Cool. Yeah, I appreciate everyone joining today. I know it's still feels like holiday, but yeah, it's this is gonna be a pretty jam-packed session, so I'm excited. I guess I'll just go ahead and kick it off. Maybe like one more minute. Let's see. Oh yeah, the JavaScript course I referenced. Yes, that's right. So that I think maybe this one is what I was referring to. Just JavaScript. This is like a JavaScript ebook. Oh, they're doing a Black Friday sale actually that ends in 3 days, so it's 50% off. This is probably the most one of the best books or ebooks on JavaScript I've found. It's written by Dan Abramov, who, if you don't know, Dan Abramov's like kind of a celebrity in the web dev community, especially for React. And he wrote this book called Just JavaScript, and it's really great. Like I can kind of show you. Well, I guess I'm not logged in on this, but yeah, it just provides like a really good visual way of explaining JavaScript, which I've never seen before. Most JavaScript books are just tons of text, and I don't know about you, but my attention span isn't that great these days. And yeah, I just find that this explanation is really good. So yeah, check it out. There are a lot of new Black Friday deals after we asked last week that came out, and this is definitely one of the good ones. Just JavaScript, and I think another one that I recommended was Three.js. We're not quite there yet. I mean, we are kind of there, as in you are capable of learning this now that we've covered JavaScript. But I think Three.js Journey is also doing a Black Friday sale somewhere. I need to find the link. But this is if you ever want to do 3D websites, 3D graphics like this is the best course for it. It's really good. And yeah, it's just a cool way to make your portfolio stand out. So if you can grab the deal, do grab it. I'll try to find a link to the deal if it's still available, because I'm not quite seeing it on the website. I'll share this in the chat as well. Hey everyone, good to see y'all. Good to see everyone here. I'm gonna go ahead and cool. All right, let me go ahead and kick it off. Today we're going to be focusing all on data fetching and APIs. Um, Terms that are probably not very familiar right now, but by the end, hopefully you'll have a pretty good idea of what they are. So last week, just as a quick recap, last week we finished up our fundamentals of JavaScript. Excuse me. Additionally, we also worked with the DOM, the document object model. We kind of got a little taste of just like kind of how it all works together, right? How all this JavaScript jargon ties back with the HTML, CSS you guys were learning in the first couple of weeks. We started to kind of like piece that all together. By now, you should be somewhat familiar. Emphasis on the somewhat, right? It's not important to like deeply understand all this stuff yet. Like that's not expectation at all. You should be somewhat familiar with these terms like variables, data types, functions, if-else statements, for loops, objects, arrays, callbacks, DOM selectors, all that. Even if some are not familiar, no worries at all. Just feel free to like refer back to any of the homework, any of the old slides or sessions if you do need a review. But once again, I do want to emphasize that like nobody ever is able to learn JavaScript in just like 2-3 weeks, right? That's very difficult. And by learn, I mean like deeply understand how it works. It does take a long time, and it's one of those things that like you're better off just like learning the fundamentals, building a lot of projects, and just by building a lot of projects, you will get a deeper understanding, or it'll force you to have a deeper understanding, as you can only go so far if you don't have that deep understanding. I'm going to answer a really quick a question from the chat. Do you know any free resources for JavaScript? Yeah, for sure. So I think the best free resources for JavaScript were some of the things I linked in the homework. So there's the Learn Programming course. I think it's like just like Learn Programming. I think it's like this one. Yeah, Learn Programming Online. They also have one called like Learn JavaScript Online. These are probably the best ones for free ones. So, Free Codecamp's another great one. Let me just kind of share all these really quick. Learn JavaScript is like the follow-up. This one's also pretty good. Free Codecamp is a really great one. And they're all very similar. It's just like you don't have to do all of them. They're kind of like redundant if you do like multiple. But just kind of pick the one that you gravitate towards most, and just kind of like stick with that. Code Academy also has a really good JavaScript one, I would say. Here. I'll link this as well. And these are all free. All 4 of these resources are completely free. Those are probably the best ones I would say for free resources. And yeah, those will also, all 4 of those should give you a good understanding or a better understanding of these concepts if you do need a review. Okay, so our agenda today is we're going to start off by zooming out a little bit. Just kind of, we were deep in the weeds for a few weeks, so now it's good to kind of like tie it back to the big picture. So we're going to start off with an analogy to a restaurant, and I'll explain that in a second. What is data fetching? So we'll go over that. We'll go over like what is an API. We're going to do some case studies just to understand like what these look like in the real world, because these are terminology. This is the type of stuff that like if you just get an explanation, it's like really hard to understand what it really is. So I've always found that case studies help a lot with like deeply understanding the stuff. So we'll do some case studies. We'll talk a little bit more about like working with the fetch function or fetch method in JavaScript and how to use that. And then we're actually going to, if we have time, we're going to actually build our first app that uses APIs and fetch. And we're going to try to basically build like a mini Pokédex app, or just like a very simple like application using some Pokemon data that we'll get. That's it. And let's see, it's just a quick question from chat. There's a lot of stuff on Code Academy locked behind Pro. Yeah, for sure. Code Academy has changed their like business model not recently, but like over the years, and that they lock a lot of like the advanced stuff, but I think it's still a lot of the beginner stuff, like for JavaScript, HTML, CSS. That stuff still should be free. Do let me know if you're not able to access the JavaScript stuff, but I want to say like at least the JavaScript portion, at least most of it should be free, and I think just the free content should be sufficient. Okay, so let's talk about the restaurant analogy. So we're learning web development, and a lot of what web development is, or at least full stack web development, can be analogized to how a dine-in restaurant runs. So if we think about like a restaurant, like a sit-down restaurant, I want you to imagine for a second that the table is the front end, or like the restaurant table is equivalent to the front. Oops, sorry, the front end of a website, and the kitchen where the cooks are and all that. That's equivalent to the back end of the website. Okay, and the reason why I bring this analogy is because I actually feel like it is very similar to how a website works. We have customers, right, that sit down at the table. So in this case, we have website visitors or users that visit our websites, our front ends, right? And then there's a waiter, and the waiter's job is to facilitate communication between the table in the customers by extension and the kitchen. Right, when you go to a restaurant, sit down, you look at the menu, you see what options are there, and you order. So maybe the menu in the table could be just thought of as the HTML CSS part, but when you want to order, aka like interact or like make a request, then you would tell your waiter, like, hey, this is what I want, and the waiter would go tell your request to the kitchen. So in this case, let's say I want to order a hamburger, right? I tell the waiter like, hey, I want to order a hamburger. The waiter goes to the kitchen, tells the chefs like, hey, this table 12 wants a hamburger. The kitchen makes the hamburger, and the waiter brings it back to me. And this is actually very similar to how our full stack architecture looks like. So basically, to visualize this further, so we have the table now on the left for some reason. We can think of like choosing a meal as like the user experience, right? And once again, the waiter is responsible for user requests, right? When we choose a meal and we like order things, without the waiter, we can't just like, we wouldn't be able to order food, right? If there was no waiter, at least not easily. We could probably just yell it. We can yell our requests to the kitchen, but that's not how most restaurants work, right? The waiter is there to take our requests or like our order and bring it to the kitchen, and the kitchen responsible for actually making it. And so you can imagine like HTML, CSS as being the components that kind of make up the choosing a meal part, and then JavaScript takes care of a lot of the making the request. So it's a very high level analogy, but I find that it really helps when we're talking about APIs and backend and fetch, because just to also recap, for the first couple of weeks of our bootcamp, we were really just focusing on this part, right? We were really just in the front end world of web development. So we focused on HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and now we're starting to make the bridge, starting with the waiter portion. We're gonna be learning what the waiter does basically, and then we're gonna move a little bit more into like the kitchen backend side of things. So this can also be seen as like a map of where we are in our front end journey. Right now we're like here. And in this lesson, we're about to learn more about what the waiter does, which is sending requests back and forth between the kitchen and the customers. So hopefully that makes sense. It'll hopefully make more sense after we go into a real example and not just an analogy. But I just want us to keep this restaurant image in our head as we go through this lesson. Okay, so now let's talk about data fetching. So in our analogy, one of the waiter's responsibilities was to submit requests from the customers, right? Like if I was a customer and I want a burger, I'm requesting the burger, right? I can't just like, I want a burger and the burger just materializes, right? There needs to be actual work done. Like someone needs to actually prepare the burger and all that. So I'm actually just requesting a burger. So that's one of the responsibilities of the waiter, to take my request as a customer and give that to the kitchen. Once the kitchen actually finishes the food, the waiter needs to respond by taking the food from the kitchen and bringing it back to me, the customer. So we call this like paradigm, this interaction of like the client talking to the server of there's a request coming from the client. So this part right here is the request, and the server sends back a response. And it's important that we focus on these specific terms, request and response, because these are very key terms in the world of data fetching, and they're really key terms in the backend world where we're going to be in a few weeks. So I want us to remember these two words, request and response. They will be showing up very often. Also, let me show up, one second, let me turn on my mouse logger. Oopsies. What's I meant to do? What's it called? I forgot what my forgot my keylogger is called. Let's pose. Oh yeah, there we go. I turned it on. All right. So data fetching is basically the term that we use to describe this overall interaction, right? There we go. It's basically the term to describe this interaction of the client making a request and the server giving a response, right? That's all I want us to get from this. And the kitchen in this example, it can also be referred to as an API, which stands for an application programming interface. API is one of those terms that you might have seen a lot already, but you might not have a clue what it means. No worries. We're about to get into exactly what an API is, because I remember I was really confused by APIs. So the fancy technical definition of an API is it's a set of definitions and protocols for building and integrating apps. You can think of an API as kind of like a contract, basically. It's a contract between the client and server, and the contract says, hey, if the client sends me this, as a server, I send back this, right? So if we go back to the restaurant example, the contract in this example is like me ordering food, right? It's like, as a client, if I place an order for food, I expect my food to come back, right? That's the contract that I expect. It's not a real written contract, but like, as we go to restaurants, that's like the expectation that we have as customers. So an API can be thought of as something similar. And there's many different kinds of APIs. And usually when you see the term API, what they actually mean is an HTTP REST API, right? More weird words, but don't worry. This is one of those things, like, you don't need to understand exactly what the term means. Like, you don't need to know the dictionary definition of the word. You just need to know how you can use it in your own applications. I feel like that's far more important. Anywho, REST stands for representational state transfer. Once again, you don't have to memorize that. And it's basically an architectural style that defines a set of constraints. And these constraints are basically can be condensed into 5 main methods. So there's a get, a post, a put, a patch, and a delete. So what do these all mean? This slide probably just seems like a bunch of jargon, because it basically is. And I think only after we see some case studies will this all come together a lot better. But basically, in this diagram, we can see that, once again, we have our request response diagram, where the client sends a request. In this case, the request, instead of a order from a restaurant, our request in a web app looks like a URL, maybe. So we send a request to this URL, and the server gives us back some response. And this response could be an HTML page, it could be SOAP, it could be an image, it could be a lot of different things. But we'll get to what exactly this means in a second. So the good thing is that you are pretty much already familiar with GET requests, even though you might not label it as such. And this is because we all use web browsers, right? Whenever you use a web browser, essentially whenever you visit a web page, most of the time you're making a GET request, right? Because you basically type in a URL, you click enter, and what happens is you have, after you hit enter, you have made a request to that website. And the website, to obligate their part of the contract, they're obligated to send you back the web page. This is one of those things that we take for granted, right? Because it always happens. It just doesn't, like, it never not works like that. But that in itself is the simplest version of a GET request. So if we take this to a website like Unsplash, right? Unsplash is a website that has a bunch of images. So if we take, look at this URL that gives us a link to an image, clicking on this link, as soon as I click on this link, I will have made a GET request. And this particular link gives me an image. It gives me a JPEG image. So that's the data that gets responded with. So I click on this. It all happened in an instant, so we can't slow it down. But as soon as I clicked on it, as you can see, the URL is in my browser bar. We have made the request, and Unsplash has sent back this image. Very simple stuff, and it made me seem like super obvious, but the point I want to make here is this, like, we use GET requests every day. It's the most common type of request, and every website you visit on the internet is basically giving you a GET request. So that's like a very simple example. Okay, let's go to something a little bit more complex in a real app, right? Because what we've just shown, this is just like a static image, right? This is not anything crazy, but this is still a GET request. Let's think about a more realistic example. So let's say TikTok, for example, right? TikTok is an app that has a ton of data on it, right? And it uses many different types of requests. But let's walk through exactly how the feed works and how that ties back to GET requests. So when you visit TikTok, when you go to TikTok on your phone or when you go to TikTok on the web app, the same thing happens, which is the TikTok makes a GET request to their servers, to their backend, that gives them or gives the front end the feed of videos, right? If you've been to TikTok, as soon as you log on, you know that the first thing you see is a list of videos, like a feed. So the flow looks something like this. If the user goes to TikTok.com or the TikTok web app or the TikTok mobile app, right? It doesn't matter. TikTok's front end then makes a GET request to TikTok's backend. This is not their real backend URL, but this is just pretend it is, right? So the TikTok's front end would basically tell the backend, like, hey, the user just visited our site. Give me a list of videos that they would be interested in as their feed, right? So they make a GET request to their API or their server. And TikTok's API basically responds and sends back a JSON of videos. JSON, this is a term that is also new to us. For now, let's just think of JSON as data. So JSON could be an array, it could be an object, it's just like some bits of data, right? So it sends back a JSON representation of videos. And the front end basically takes this JSON and then it turns it into what we see here on the left. So it turns it into what we users see as the TikTok interface. And so what this JSON might look like is something like this. Maybe it sends back an object that has the key videos, and maybe videos is a list or an array. And this array looks like something like this. It's an array of objects, right? We see that the username for this first video is the real POV cook. We see that their actual name is the real POV cook. We maybe get their video URL and then their description. And as you can see, obviously this is fake data that I mocked up from the site, but this is an example of what it could look like, right? You see that the username here is the same as the username that we see on the front end, and that maybe this video URL is the same as like this video right here. So basically this is what's happening on every single website like TikTok, like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, like they all work very similarly. And yeah, I'll leave that example at this for now. Once again, this is all GET requests, right? This is basically, we're looking under the hood as to how an app like TikTok works. And they all use GET requests, right? Basically, every complex app that you will build will use some kind of API calls. Okay, so that was all GET requests, right? We talked about Unsplash. We talked about the TikTok feed. Those are examples of GET requests. When remember, GET requests are the most common. You're just getting data, right? It's very simple. Okay, what if you want to let users upload data? So what could, like an example of that in TikTok is the video upload, right? We can, as TikTok users, we can upload our own videos. That's not a GET request, right? Because you're actually adding things to TikTok's database. So let's walk through what exactly that looks like. So whenever you have a situation when you want your users to upload data or add data, you're going to use a post request. And so what this could look like on TikTok might be something like this. The user first clicks the upload button, and then they get to this form, right? And then they fill out the form. Maybe they upload their video, they type a caption, they set their privacy settings, etc. And then they click post right here after they fill out their information. And then what happens is after they click post, the front end fires a post request to TikTok's backend, basically saying, hey, the client wants to upload something. Here you go. And then the front end pushes that to the back end. And the back end responds with whether or not the upload was successful. So what could this look like? Well, this is an example of what the request might look like. Once again, this is all fake. This is not exactly what TikTok's data structure looks like. This is just my representation of it. But maybe the front end would send a JSON object to the back end that looks like this. It would say, hey, the username for this user is my TikTok username. Maybe the caption that they typed here is this. The URL that they uploaded was this. And maybe they want their privacy to be public, right? Something like that. This is just a really rough example, a very simplified example. But in this case, as you can see with the post request, we have to send some data, right? So that's why we're sending this request that looks like this. And one thing to note about JSON is that you might be like, what? JSON just looks like a JavaScript object, and that's basically what it is. Not to get into too much complexities here, but for the most part, you can think of JSON as just working with arrays and objects. They are very similar. They're not exactly the same. There are some minor differences, but JSON is just like, I think it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So it's literally like the object notation of JavaScript. So that's why it kind of looks like this. Okay, so that was all case study stuff. Now, how do we actually use this in JavaScript? How do we use this in our own apps? Well, most of the time, well, not most of the time, in the beginning, you're going to be heavily using a built-in function called fetch. And most browsers support this function called fetch. And this allows you to actually make the requests, right? So you can then basically do stuff with the data that gets returned. So if we look at an example of a fetch call right here, we see here fetch, and then you put the URL that you want to fetch data from. So in this case, we have a fake website that ends with /movies.json. So maybe like if we send a request to the site, we get back a big list of movies, for example. And then we have these .then calls. So it's like .then response, arrow function, response.json, and then .then data console.log data. I don't want us to focus too much on the .then syntax because we're not quite there yet. This is what we call a promise in JavaScript. And basically to summarize it really quick so we don't like worry about the nuances of promises too much because that is going to come later. You can think of promises as a alternative to callbacks for the most part. So promises allow us to chain multiple functions in a row. Remember with callbacks how you had to like put a function inside another function and all that? And it gets really messy, right? Like if you have like 5 functions nested in a row, it probably doesn't look very great. But promises basically gives you an easier way to handle that stuff because you can just add .thens at the end of a promise. So basically here it's like we fetch that data, right? Once the data gets back to us, then we turn the response, right? Remember the response is what we get back. We turn that into JSON, and then we take the data that we got from the JSON, and then we console log it. So it's a lot more readable, right? This promise syntax is a lot more readable than if we were to show this as a callback structure. But once again, I don't want us to get too caught up on promises today. We're only introducing promises in the form of fetch, just because it's a very standard way to do fetch. But we'll get a lot more into promises when we get into the back end side of things, just because it's a little bit more appropriate. So hopefully that makes sense. But I think another thing to note here is that callbacks and promises, in this case, they solve a problem that we didn't have before. And this problem is a term we'll see it very often, is it solves asynchronous calls. And asynchronous means like whenever there's like a element of time involved in the request. What I mean by that is like when I make a request to a website, it doesn't happen instantaneously, right? When I make a request to a website, my internet speed needs to send a request to their servers, and the servers need to get the data and send it back. That doesn't happen instantaneously, right? It doesn't happen necessarily at the speed of light. There's a delay. And the reason why we use promises or callbacks to handle that stuff is because JavaScript doesn't wait for delays by default. Like if you write code that like grabs data from a website and then the next line after that you do something with that data, if you don't use promises or callbacks, JavaScript might run the second line without waiting for the first line to finish. That's just how JavaScript works. So that's why we use promises and callbacks. So hopefully that might not make too much sense right now, but that's a little justification as to why like we are introducing promises and callbacks kind of so early on. And yeah, once again, we'll get a lot deeper into promises. For now, I just want us to focus on this part, the fetch, because that's what we're going to be using today. Maybe a little bit of this syntax, but we don't have to deeply worry about what it means exactly. Okay, So now is the moment of truth. We're going to be building our first app where we actually use an API. And this is exciting for a couple reasons. One, because I feel like whenever web dev students get to the API section, it's like a turning point, because before APIs, like, you're strictly limited to like very simple like to-do apps and stuff like that. After you become familiar with APIs and how to really use them, the number of ideas and applications you can build becomes like 100 times more, maybe even 1,000 times more, because so much of programming is building off of things that other people have made, right? If you want to build an AI app, you can build one in a day. You don't need to train your own AI, because you can use an AI API, right? You can basically just make requests to an AI service that someone else made, and then boom, you have AI capabilities in your app. So that's why I think APIs are so important to learn. They too take a while to get used to, and we are going to work with very simple ones in the beginning. But I will, if we have some time after, I can show you some of the APIs that I encourage you to just check out and play around with on your own time, because yeah, you can just add a lot to your app. So in this case, we're going to be working with an API called the Pokey API. We're basically just going to create a very simple app that is going to show a random Pokemon every time someone visits our site, right? Very simple, kind of pointless, but this is just to demo how we can integrate like an API into our own application. So first, let me pull up the Pokey API. I'm going to share the link in the chat. All right. Okay, so this is the Pokey API, the RESTful Pokemon API. Remember, some of these terms we've met before, right? REST and API. Basically, this site, this API, it just gives you Pokemon data. So this is a lot of APIs have a tool that you can use to test it. So here, if we, as you can see, their API call looks like a URL, and then you can add your own Pokemon. You can grab a random Pokemon. You can get like certain types. You can get like all the Pokemons with certain ability. It's very flexible. I'm sure you can find very creative uses for it. But for now, let's see what happens if we click submit. Or maybe I'll just change the Pokemon to like, I don't know, Pikachu or something. Pikachu. So I'm going to type in Pikachu as my Pokemon, and I'm going to click submit. Okay, so this is the data that we get back. So if we pretend that like what we just did here, this is the equivalent of writing a fetch call, right? We basically put this whole URL, I can't select all of it, but you know, all this stuff right here, we basically put this all in a fetch call, and when we submit, we actually make that fetch request, and this data that is shown here is the response. And this is specifically the response that's in JSON format, right? Because it looks like JavaScript object. So whenever we see something that looks like a JavaScript object or a JavaScript like array, we know it's JSON. Okay, so as you can see, we get a ton of data back here, right? We get Pikachu's abilities. So the abilities comes back as a list of objects. It's going to take a while to like get used to reading this, because it does look very messy. It comes over time. But as you can see, it helps like if you use the toggles and minimize some sections, it makes it a little easier to read. But basically, if I just read through this very fast, you can get a list of all of Pikachu's abilities. So Pikachu can have static or lightning rod. And you can even see if the ability is a hidden ability or not. I don't really know what slot means. It's been a really long time since I've been in the Pokemon world. So someone will have to educate me on what that means. Let's see what else they have. Oh, base experience. I guess maybe this is what experience, how much experience they start with. I have no idea what base experience is actually. Held items. So if you catch a Pikachu in the wild, I'm guessing these are the items that they can hold. Very interesting. The ID of the Pokemon. What else? Oh, the moves. Okay, so you can see all 96 moves that Pikachu can learn, which is kind of crazy. But we notice like each of these moves, they also have their own URL, right? Which is another API call. So if we want information on like all the Pokemon that can learn Double Kick, we could probably just make a call to this API, and that would probably give it to us. So it's kind of cool. Anyways, I'm going to skip through the moves. We have the name of the Pokemon. Obviously, it's Pikachu. Past types, species. There's 2 species of Pikachu. Oh no, basically it's just, yeah, I don't know what this represents, but maybe this is like the family that Pikachu belongs to. And then we get the sprites. This is the stuff we want, right? Because we don't want to just show text on our website. We want to show an image. And as you can see, the sprites, they actually give us the links to the game sprites of what Pikachu looks like. So if you want to show the back of a shiny Pikachu, we could just take the data, get the sprites key, and then get the back shiny key or back shiny female, because they're different colors, and then those will give us the correct image that we want to show. So that's kind of cool. What else do we got? Oh, they even have the Dream World sprites or the official artwork, so that's kind of cool. We might make use of that. As you can see, there's a lot of data, right? There's a lot of data that we get back, and it definitely takes some time to like go through and see what we need. But you can see we pretty much get an overload of information. We get the images of Pikachu, we get the stats, we get the moves, we get what type it is, we can even get the weight, so it's kind of funny. And yeah, if you don't want to view it in this format, you can also just view the raw JSON. So if you check this is what the data actually is going to look like in a more realistic format, like when we get it with our JavaScript. So if you do prefer this format, actually I prefer this format, do check this raw JSON checkbox and it will give it to you. Okay, so, and also to demonstrate, I'll show you what I mean by like, this is a URL, right? If I basically just copy and paste this, so pokeapi.co/API/v2, and then I add this Pokemon/Pikachu, and I press enter. As you can see in my browser, remember what we just did was a GET request, right? This is the same thing as a GET request, and so we get all this data back. It's definitely a lot more readable, right, when we look at it here, because here they've pretty printed it for us, right? They basically made it look pretty, whereas the browser doesn't do that by default, so that's why it looks like it's so much information. So I highly advise not looking at the data in this format, just because it's impossible to figure out what's going on, right? Like I would have no idea how many keys there are or like what's available. It's like nigh unreadable. So I definitely prefer this viewer right here, but it's basically the same data, right? Okay, so there's a lot more that you can get from here. They even have like a full documentation on the API and like how do you do stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's so much. There's berries, contests, encounters, evolutions, games, items, locations, machines. Wow, there's actually a ton you can do with this. I originally thought this API was just Pokemon, like the Pokemon itself, but it's actually everything that has to do with the game, so that's kind of cool. All right, so how do we get a random Pokemon? That's what we want to know, right? We want to know the URL that would give us a random Pokemon. So we could find this out by maybe what happens if we just leave out the Pokemon / and we just type /Pokemon. What does this give us? Oh no, this just gives us all the Pokemon. Okay, that's fine. Is there a random Pokemon? Let's see. Let's click on the Pokemon. Its abilities. I'm sure there's a random Pokemon type. Maybe I'll just Google it. Pokemon API random Pokemon. I'm just gonna grab the code from someone's code. Okay, it looks like it looks like the easiest way is to just randomize an ID. So in this case, they are randomizing up to the first 500 Pokemon. They grab a random ID, and then they make a request. So I guess that's how we're gonna have to do it too. Okay, that's fine. Cool. All right, so I think that's everything we need to actually get started with our app. I'm gonna go ahead and make this window a little bit smaller, or like move it over to the left. And then I'm gonna open our Visual Studio Code, and feel free to follow along. There we go. Let me go ahead and create I'm gonna create a new folder. Get rid of this old project. All right, so we go to projects, Bootcamp projects, new folder. We call this Pokédex or random Pokemon, I don't know. All right, create that. Cool, so we open that. Yes, I trust myself. All right, how's that? Can you guys see? Okay, cool. Looks like you guys can see the editor. Cool. So we're gonna just run through the same stuff that we usually do, which is we're gonna create an HTML page, right? We're gonna put all the basic stuff in it. We're gonna load a JavaScript file, and that's how we'll get started. So let's go ahead and create our index.html. I'm gonna kind of rush through this part just because we should be somewhat familiar with this. So I'm gonna create a head, title, Pokédex app. I'm just gonna call it random Pokemon. And then I'm gonna put a body. And then in the body, getting a call for some reason. In the body, I'm gonna put, let's see. Yeah, I'll just leave the body blank for now. Maybe I'll just say like, I don't know, here's a random Pokemon. And then under this stuff maybe is where we want to show the actual Pokemon. So maybe I'll just put like a div, ID equals Pokemon. And yeah, that should be fine. We'll just leave this for now. So this is what our site looks like, very basic. Let's see. Let me check chat, make sure I didn't miss anything. Hello. If you're new here, welcome. This is a free coding bootcamp. If you do want to see like the full syllabus, you can check out our Notion at this /Notion link. But yeah, we're a couple weeks in, so don't worry if a lot of this is like really fast. All right, cool. So we got our HTML set up. Let's go ahead and set up our JavaScript now. So I'm just going to create a JavaScript file. I'm just going to call it index.js. And for now, basically, if we just walk through, let's do the pseudocode of what we want, right? When a user visits our website for the first time, as soon as they visit the website, as soon as they go to the website that we are building, we want to make the fetch call. So let's write that down. As soon as website loads, basically, make get request to the Poke API. There's a step we're missing here because we need to grab a random Pokemon. Well, actually, let's not worry about the random. Let's just start by doing this. For now, we'll hard code the Pokemon as like Pikachu or something. But yeah, we'll figure out like how to do the random in a second. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the main page because it's a lot more. Yeah, this is a lot better for me. All right, cool. So let's do this first. Oh, sorry, really quick question in the chat. Do you have a YouTube channel? Yes, I do. If you can use the !YouTube command, and that will give you the link to the YouTube. On the YouTube, we have all the past recordings uploaded there. Some of the quality for the first ones aren't great, so I apologize for that. We're working on re-uploading it, but all the videos should be there. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so these are our basic steps. So let's walk through and actually do this. First, I guess let me load this index.js file in our HTML because we haven't done that yet. So I'm just going to add a script tag, source equals index.js, and then we're going to close that. Oops. There we go. All right. We have our JavaScript loaded. And then so as soon as our website loads, we could just write a fetch call here. But to be safe, we should probably use the window on load event. Basically, window on load is only going to do something after the page loads, right? If we just write fetch right here, like to the Pokemon API, if we just do it like right here, we run the risk of this fetch call running before the content even loads. So we might not be able to like, sync up the two. So that's why it's best to like wait for the website to actually load first. And one way we could do that is by using this built-in method on the window called onLoad. So basically everything we put in here, everything here will only run when the page loads. So like when everything on the page loads, like the scripts and the HTML, everything. This is just like a good habit. Like I'm pretty sure our app will still work even if we do put fetch outside of this, but this is just like good practice. Okay, I'm gonna move the pseudocode in here. All right, so let's go ahead and now write our first fetch call. So what this could look like is we type fetch, and then we need to put the URL of what we're requesting, right? So in this case, let's just grab the same URL that we were messing around with here. So let's grab this, I'm gonna grab this first part, paste this here. Just to make a good practice, I'm actually gonna save this as a variable. So I'm gonna actually say const, or yeah, const Poke API URL. I don't really like how it looks. I'm just gonna say Poke URL to shorten it. Okay, so this is our Poke URL. Maybe like base URL actually. It's probably better because this is the base URL. Okay, so we want to make a fetch to the base URL, maybe /Pokemon/Ditto or something. Maybe we'll just add the Pokemon here. So if we want to grab the data for Ditto, we can just do something like this. We can do base URL plus Ditto. So this would be like, Poke API /API/v2 /Pokemon/Ditto. But remember, if you guys remember from a previous session, I said I don't like this format. Like, this is not really great practice anymore to add strings together. It's a lot better if you're going to add strings together by doing a template string, which basically looks like this. I'll just actually do this, yeah. Basically, it will create a new string, but with variables in it. So here I have the base URL /Ditto. This is just like a lot cleaner syntax. So this is just like best practice. Okay, so we have our fetch. Now I'm gonna use the .then syntax that we saw, right? This is for promises. So we're gonna get the response arrow function, and this is also standard practice. We then return the JSON of the response, and then we can write another .then, and let's have this .then show an alert, right? Let's just have it like show the data. Well, maybe not as an alert. Let's just have a console log. Remember, we saw what the data looked like, right, on our browser, and it was a ton. And imagine that all showing up in a pop-up. That would actually be kind of scary. So let's actually not do that. Let's just console log the data. Okay, so to review what we have here, we have written code inside an onload listener. So when the page loads, it's gonna make a fetch request to the Pokemon API. And for now, we've just hard-coded we want Ditto, so we're gonna get back data for Ditto. We're gonna .then to get the JSON, and then another .then to actually show the data response. And this is just like standard practice. Like, this is the most common way you'll be working with APIs. So like a fetch, one .then to get the JSON, and another .then to actually use the data. So let's just leave this for now, and let's go ahead and save everything. Make sure everything's good. And before we test it, let's know what we should expect. Like at least what we should expect if it's working. If the page is working, when we visit our website and we open our console, we should see all that data that we saw at the Pokemon API. So let's try it. I'm gonna go ahead and open this in my Finder and then drag it into my browser. Okay. Yes, I can copy paste that code. Absolutely. Sorry, I know I went a little fast on writing it. We'll get back to that. Oops. Window on load is not a function. That's probably because I messed up the, let me see. I should probably, on load actually might not be available in certain browsers. Let me try add event listener. I've actually never used the on load before, so maybe that's why that's not really working. Let me try add event listener load. So this is basically the same thing. But before it was on load, now it's like we're listening for the event load. So it's like very similar. But I wonder if this will work for us instead. Let's go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and refresh. Oh, okay, so that works. So for future reference, don't use on load. I guess that doesn't work. But add event listener load works fine. I'm gonna copy and paste this code in the chat. I'm gonna get rid of some of these comments. It might show up really ugly in the chats, but hopefully if you paste into your editor with Prettier, it should fix that up. So apologies there. But check this out. So we can see that, maybe I spelled window wrong or something. or I don't know what I did wrong, but for some reason onload didn't work for me. I'm not sure why, but yeah, let me know if you're able to figure out why. But for now, event listener should work. Okay, but check out this data, right? Like we get this basically this huge object, and it resembles the same object that we saw in this, right? That is the same object that we're seeing here. Like all this data here is exactly what we're getting here. Perfect. So all of a sudden we have all this data that we can use in our app, and yeah, I mean that's great. Let's just start by having let's start by just having the Pokemon that we get the data for just show up here. So we want to put their image, and then we want to put their the text after. So someone asked, what if we put the script HTML on top and then use the attribute defer? Yeah, that's probably the better way of doing it, honestly. Like I always forget about defer and stuff, but it's possible that like that is why my onload isn't working. But I encourage you to try that and let me know if that works. I'm actually not super familiar with defer. Like I've used it before, but I don't have a deep understanding of like how it works in this instance. But yeah, let me know if that works for you, because I think that should solve the trick. Like it'll help like let everything load first and then load a JavaScript, and then it can go from there. Okay, cool. So let's finish this up by first adding the data that we're getting and showing it on the page, right? So we want to grab the image, and the image is found in the sprites key. So if you look at my data, let me make this a little bigger actually. Is that better? Okay, hopefully that's big enough. But here you can see the sprites key right here. Click that, and you can see all the different sprites for Ditto. And it's just going to give you a bunch of images, right? These are all like image links. If I copied this, paste this in our browser, remove the quotation marks, we get an image of a shiny Ditto, right? Pretty cute. Okay. So let's go ahead and just show that on our page for now. Very simple. So right now, all we have in our HTML is an empty div with the ID Pokemon. So we basically want to add a image tag here with that image sprite we just grabbed, and then maybe we will put some text under that has the name of the Pokemon or something like that. You know, there's a lot you can do with it, and I'm the focus of the demo is definitely not on visuals. So I encourage you to like go ham and make your own fancy version of this. But you know, right now it's just very simple. Okay, so in the .then, this is where we have to write our code, right? If we wrote our code outside of the .then, first of all, we wouldn't have access to this data, right? The data is only accessible in this .then function. Not only that, but any code we wrote here, this code would run before this code does. Isn't that weird? And that's what I mean by the asynchronous part, right? This takes time. This fetch call is not instant. So because this takes time, that's why you use the .thens to process the data in a specific order. So actually, let me show you what I mean. I will prove to you that this console log, this will show up first, and then this will show up. So let me show you and put money where my mouth is, because at least I'm pretty sure that's how it should work. Let me save and refresh. I'm gonna make this smaller. Okay, yeah, okay, I wasn't lying. See, hi showed up first. Hi showed up first, and then the data, even though this line of code is under this. It's crazy, right? But that's why JavaScript is so frustrating, because so many errors happen where you're like, wait, the code is supposed to run top down, so why is it not running top down? Well, it only runs top down if we're not talking asynchronous calls. So that's like a big caveat. Anywho, so okay, so in chat, defer is used to not block the DOM waiting to load the script, so that script will run in the background, so the script will be run after DOM. Oh, gotcha, that makes sense. So you're telling me that defer, if I add defer here, it basically only runs the script after the page loads, which means I don't even need this listener? That makes sense. And you also mentioned something about putting this at the top of the body? Or did you mean like the head? I'm learning this too. I actually never had a deep understanding of how defer works, so that's actually super helpful. I won't do it now, just because we're almost done with this session here. But that's actually super useful to know for anybody else who's trying to build this project on your own. But yeah, so this is a great example of asynchronicity or asynchronous code in action. Anywho, I got sidetracked. Let's go ahead and finish up by doing something with this data. Let's have this data show on the page. So remember, data is just an object, right? This right here, this whole thing, this is data. This is what data is. So that means if we console log data.name, it's going to show ditto, right? So let's save this and let's refresh. And as you can see, it says ditto. Well, I don't know if you can see because it's kind of small, but as you can see, it says ditto. Okay. Actually, I shouldn't have done that because I need to see what data looks like again. Let me go back. So to grab the sprites, we need to get data.sprites dot what? Let's just grab the front shiny, right? Let's just grab the front shiny sprite. So data.sprites.front shiny. So maybe we can save that as a variable. So we can say like, I don't know, shiny sprite equals data dot sprites dot front shiny. Something like that. Now, we're not doing TypeScript right now, but this code isn't actually that great because what if the data comes back and there is no sprites key or front shiny key, right? This will actually throw an error, which we don't want. We're not actually going to worry about that right now. We'll talk a lot more about good code when we get to the TypeScript part. But just to note that like this code is technically kind of unsafe. It's safe for us because we know kind of what it looks like, but what if Poke API is down, right? Then we have our app having an error, which is not great. Okay, so this is going to give us a link to the sprite. So to create a new image, we got to create a new image element, set this as the source, and then add the image element to this div, right? That's our game plan. So let me write this pseudocode, create image element, set image source as shiny sprite. Oops. And then we want to add image element to the Pokemon or the div ID Pokemon. Something like that. I'll need to look some of this up because I don't remember actually how to set the source. I think it's like set attribute or something. So this will be a fun journey. All right, so let's create an element first. I think we can just do const img equals, I think it's document dot create element. Create element, parentheses, and then we say the name of the element. So in this case, it's img because it's an image tag. Okay, so far so good. I wonder if we can just do image.source equals shiny sprite. I'm curious to see if this works. Please, someone let me know if this is not going to work. But in theory, this should allow you to set the source as shiny sprite. And then we're going to add the image element to the DOM. So first, let's select our Pokemon div. So const Pokemon div equals Pokemon div equals document dot get element by ID. We're gonna get element by ID Pokemon. I think is what I called it. And then we're going to go ahead and we want to basically put image inside Pokemon div. So it's like Pokemon div dot append image. So let's see if this works. So the game plan is we get the data, we get the sprite image, we set the image to the source of a new image element we create, and then we're going to add that image element to the page. So let's save that. In the moment of truth, let's go ahead and refresh our page. Yay, we got a ditto. That's so cute. Nice. So now we've basically, excuse me, we've added third-party data, right? This is not our data. We didn't write all this this information about ditto. We just grabbed it from an API, and now we're free to do whatever we want with it in our app. So yay, that's cool. I'm gonna go ahead and also just put the name of the Pokemon too, just why not? So I think name is like const name equals data.name, I think. And then let's add like a text element, I guess, or like a header element. So let's create a header element, h1 equals, well, actually no, we can't put number. Let's do a header equals document dot create element h1. And then we do like header.inner text, I think. Header.inner text equals name. And then let's also, actually I want to move this Pokemon div up here. So we can just call Pokemon div dot append header. So it's going to show the header first and then the Pokemon image, basically, right? It's going to add the name and then add the image. So let's save this. Let's refresh. And as you can see, we get our random Pokemon. Yay! Beautiful. Well, sorry, it's not random, right? I lied. It's not random because we're actually, it's going to be Ditto every time, right? Every time we refresh this page, it's going to be Ditto. And so let's round this up by adding the randomization factor. So how do we grab a random Pokemon here? I'm curious to see, if we put a number instead of an actual Pokemon name, will it give us the ID? Let's try it. Let's save that, refresh. Okay, so like number 2 is Ivysaur, so that makes sense. So it looks like we can just randomize a number between 1 and, how many Pokemon are there? I heard there's like 1,000 Pokemon now, but I don't know if that's true. It's been like years since I've been in this world, so let me know if that's true. Did it even have 1,000 Pokemon on Pokemon API? Let's try. We put 1,000, save. Okay, so it doesn't work. So it looks like they don't they don't have like 1,000 Pokemon yet. What about like 600? Let's see what the max. Okay, so there's like at least 600. Let's see how far we can go. 700. Okay, 700 is good. 800. God dang, there's so many Pokemon. 800 Pokemon. 900. Okay, something's wrong with the 900 Pokemon. All right, let's just make it work up to 800, right? So our function. Or not function, we need to basically write some code that gets a random number between 1 and 800. So there's many ways to do that, and there's probably a best way to do that, and Google is a good source of that. So random number between 1 and 100 JavaScript, and we can just replace 100 with whatever we want. Yay, let's grab the Stack Overflow thread, generate random number between 2 numbers. This is one of those things that you're going to get used to Googling like a million times because I can never remember. Yeah, this syntax right here. So they actually just give you a function, random int from interval. You put the min, you put the max, and it just gives you this like math equation, math.floor, the random. There's 898, someone says. Is that true? Oh, that might be true actually. Let's try 898. Let's save that. Let's refresh the Pokemon. Okay, so if this is truly the last Pokemon, then yeah, 898 is going to be our limit. Thank you there. So let's actually grab this function, yoink, and let's paste it into our code. A good habit also, whenever you paste code from Stack Overflow, sometimes it's good to copy where the source came from, just because, you know, sometimes your manager or your teammate will be like, what the heck, like, where does this come from? Or like, why does this make sense? And, you know, if you have a Stack Overflow thread to back it up, then it looks a lot better. Cool. So this is our function that we grabbed. And basically what we want to do is we want to grab, before we make our API call, right? We basically need to replace this 898 with a random number between 1 and 898. So let's do like const random number equals, so we're going to call our function that we just copied, random int from interval. We're going to pass in 1 and 898. Oh, that's just your lucky number. I thought there were actually 898 Pokemon. There's probably more then. That's okay. We'll leave your lucky number in here. That's gonna be my gift to you. Cool. So random number between 1 and 898. So we're gonna take this random number and we're gonna replace this in our URL with random number. And this is actually gonna convert it to a string too, since we're using this template string. Okay. So let's save this, and theoretically, every time we refresh the page, this should generate a new number, I think. Let's double check. Let's try it. So I'm gonna save that. We can go to our website. Yo, wait, is that really a Pokemon? What the Amped? Man, what's going on with Pokemon? Like this does not look familiar to me at all. But I guess it's working. Oh, cool! Yay! So every time we refresh, we get a new shiny Pokemon. Cool. Nice. Actually works pretty well. Cool. So yeah, very, very basic app right here, but this is just to demonstrate, you know, we just used one API and we made one very simple application. Think about what you can do if you use all the features that Poke API has here, right? You can do so much more. So this is, once again, very basic example here, but as you can see, like once you add APIs to your app, this 10x's, 100x's the amount of ideas you can build. So it's really fun to work around with. Cool. So that's it for the demo. I'm gonna go ahead and copy paste this code also, and I don't know if you want me to paste it in Twitch, but I'll paste it in Slack, or not Slack, sorry, Discord, because that's a little bit easier to look at. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, that's basically it for our random Pokemon app. So if you deploy this, you know, every time someone visits our website, they would get a random Pokemon. So that's kind of cool. Sweet. So let's go over the homework. So the homework is going to be basically rebuilding the same app as one of your options. So you can build a Pokemon app. And obviously, I encourage you to add a lot more features and functionality than we did today. Like we did something very basic. Yeah, you could create like a Pokemon army generator or something like that. And yeah, you can build whatever you want with Pokemon API. That's one option. Or the second option I give you is to build a weather app. There's this other API called Open Media API, which basically, as you can see, if you make a request to the weather API with your location or city or whatever, it gives you the hourly time, the hourly weather, temperature, and all that. So if you want to build your own weather app, you know, you're free to use this API as well. So I'll leave it up to you as to which one you choose. But I would not encourage you to just choose any API yet, because as you'll discover, some APIs can't be requested from the front end. This is important to note. These APIs that I've chosen here, I've chosen for two reasons. One, they're completely free, so you don't have to pay, because a lot of APIs you do have to pay. The second thing is that you can make requests from the front end, right? So if I were to copy and paste this URL into our browser, we get the data, right? This is what we like to see. There are a lot of APIs out there that don't let you do that. So we, you know, in the world of front end, which is where we are now, we're kind of limited to the APIs that we can make a request to on the front end. So that's why I asked you to stick with these two APIs unless you have a third that passes those two criteria. And yeah, also we were only worrying about GET requests for now. We're not worrying about POST requests. That will come later. For now, we're just focusing on GET requests, right? We're getting data from these APIs. So hopefully that makes sense. Yes, always free stuff. Yes, that's our motto around here. Cool. So yeah, basically just combine everything we've learned with these APIs and go crazy and build whatever you want. As a bonus, if you really want to push yourself, you have everything you need in your toolkit to create your own Chrome extension. So if you want to really, you know, if you're tired of basically just building web apps, just look up a basic Chrome extension tutorial. Make sure you get a recent one, because Chrome extensions have changed a lot, and the latest version is called V3. You can just walk through a tutorial, like a very basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript tutorial, and those are all the tools you need to build a Chrome extension. So, you know, if you want to build like a Chrome extension Pokemon app or a Chrome extension weather app, that could be a really fun challenge as well. Cool. So yeah, on this Thursday, we unfortunately have no class. I am out of town, so we're gonna take a break on Thursday. On Monday, we have a bonus session, and I say bonus is because it's not hard required, but it's highly recommended. And we're going to be focusing on Git in the command line. So this is going to be our way of just wrapping up the Git stuff that we kind of touched on in the very first week and really understanding how to use Git like as a developer. So we're going to be doing that. And then the next day on Tuesday, next Tuesday is when we're going to start diving into Svelte. And I'm super excited for that because, oh man, like if you think writing apps like this is painful, like what I have here on the right, then I have good news for you, because Svelte is like night and day compared to like this process. This might not even seem that bad, but once you go to Svelte, you'll be like, why did I why did I bother writing apps like this? I mean, there's a specific reason why we do this stuff, because this is like the fundamentals, right? It's good to learn the fundamentals, and then Svelte is like a level above that. But yeah, Svelte is awesome. I'm excited for y'all to play around with it. And yeah, that's basically it for the homework, and that's it for the session today. Before I leave you guys, I guess to also get you kind of excited about APIs, now that you're familiar with APIs, I want you guys to start, well, maybe not required now because we're not quite there yet, but there are two APIs that I'm very fond of that I think are going to be really key to building projects that will make your portfolio stand out. And we will be walking through building projects with these APIs. And these are AI APIs, right? If you guys know me, you know that have an AI background and I do work a lot with AI. But a lot of what I do with AI is through APIs. So if you go to OpenAI, you might have heard of something called GPT-3, right? Yeah, so GPT-3, they provide an API where you basically, in your JavaScript web app, you can just make a request to the API and get AI content back or AI whatever. So we're not, don't want to talk about too much of this today, but that's one example of like an API you can use, right? If you want to add AI functionality, don't worry, I'm not creating AI to kill anybody, or at least not purposely. So I will make sure of that. So if you want to have like AI text apps, so as an example, like if you want to create an app, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. Oh, I need to log in. 1 second. Don't look at my pass. Wait, my mouse logger's on. 1 second. Let me switch my browser. Can't let myself get doxxed. All right, so let me open it here. So yeah, if you want to like create a what? I'm not logged in. What are you talking about? So like if you want to create an app, like a web app that's like, I don't know, generate a list of movies like to recommend. So you can just train an AI that's like, oh, I am, or you are an intelligent AI that's tasked with recommending movies based on what someone likes. So you basically can give the AI those instructions, and then let's say your user, like the user on your site types in, they like, I don't know, let's say they really like Shrek. you can just see what the AI will recommend based on Shrek as the input. Okay, so yeah, basically this example, it's like clicking submit here was the same as making a fetch request, right? After you send this as the input to the request to the OpenAI API, what you get back is generated by the AI. And you don't need to know AI, right? That's like the beautiful thing about using these APIs. It's like you need to know very little about AI to actually build something like this. So that's a cool way to kind of extend your portfolio. So that's one API I want to put you guys on, GPT-3. The second API is like DALL-E, which is also made by OpenAI, which I'm sure you guys have seen the AI art and stuff, like Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, all that. If you're in the Discord, you might have seen the Midjourney bot that we have there. But basically, if you want to make your own app that uses AI-generated images, well, now you can't, right? Now with your new knowledge of APIs, you can think of ideas that involve like generating, I don't know, like tattoo designs or generating Etsy art. I don't know, like you can, the world's your oyster. This is a very new field, which is exciting because a lot of the good ideas I feel like haven't really been fully taken yet. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of put this out there just to show you like the possibilities that are there. Pretty cool stuff. Anywho, we'll get a lot more into like actually building things on top of this later when we get to more advanced projects. But I just want to open your world to like APIs. The final thing I'll leave us with is if you want to see a list of like all the APIs you have available. Well, one, that's kind of hard to see. Like there's thousands and hundreds of thousands of APIs available. But I've always liked Rapid API as like a good, comprehensive, organized list of APIs. Excuse me. So you can go to, I think if you go to Rapid API, oh no, I have to sign up. No, they changed their whole thing. They now called Rapid. Excuse me. Okay, there we go. So if you go, I'll send this link here. If you go to Rapid API/hub, it's still there. But basically you can see like, if you want to like a vaccine tracker for COVID, there's an API. There's like an API for sending emails to people, an API to sending texts, right? Have you ever wanted to know like how can I build an app that texts people? Well, now you can, right? With your knowledge of APIs. An API for football, recipes, reading, bionic reading, translating languages, weather. I mean, we already talked about weather. yeah, as you can see, there's all these categories: data, sports, finance, travel, entertainment. You can build like a flight tracker. There's so many possibilities, right? It's overwhelming to go through. But if you do want a list of like all the APIs you can dive through, it's a great way to get inspiration for future projects. Build API for Naruto versus Sasuke. Yeah, I mean that would be pretty interesting. I'm sure someone has a Naruto API. Let's look it up. Naruto API. Yo, there is. What the heck? Someone made an Naruto API. What does it even do? Oh, it just gives you history and information about Naruto and Boruto. Oh, that's pretty cool. That's something you could build. Anywho's. All right, cool. That's it for the main session. I'm gonna go ahead and go through chat and see any questions I missed. Do you think someone should move on to learning React after learning APIs? That depends. It depends on how comfortable are you with JavaScript, because in my experience, if you learn the basics of JavaScript and jump directly into React, it's oftentimes very difficult. Like, not everyone has struggled with that transition, but in my experience, most web dev students have struggled a lot when they go from JavaScript directly into React. And that's because React is just like a whole other beast. Like, React requires that to really understand React, you have to understand JavaScript really well. Like, I would say you should at least be intermediate to advanced in terms of your JavaScript like skill and knowledge. And I mean, it's not required. Like, I've seen complete beginners in JavaScript do stuff in React, but I'm telling you right now, like, that's only going to carry you so far. There's going to be a point when you're building React that it's just going to get so complex and so crazy that it's just very difficult to understand without a solid JavaScript background. So that's why I purposely introduced Svelte, and that's what we're actually going to be starting Svelte next week. Oops. Because in my opinion, React, like, once you learn React, you introduce like a whole other can of worms, like on top of JavaScript. You have to learn like what is Webpack, Babel, like transpilers, compilers, like you learn all these other terms. And I think it's just a lot to introduce all at once. Svelte, I like Svelte because Svelte is basically in between what we've just learned with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and React. It's like directly in between the two. So I really like Svelte as like an easy way to ease into the concepts of React, like components and props and state and all that. Like, it has all that in Svelte, but without all the crazy tooling stuff and complex like JavaScript knowledge that you would be required to know for JavaScript. So my answer to that question is like, my recommendation is no. I would not like directly jump into React without having a solid JavaScript background. I would instead first start with something like Svelte, maybe even Vue. Vue is another pretty good one. But in my opinion, I think Svelte is like the best stepping stone. You just don't want to overwhelm yourself, right? And in the past, I've seen people definitely get overwhelmed by React if you jump in too fast. So highly recommend checking that out. And we're going to be all doing this together next week, so feel free to join us for that as well. Someone asked, so is it okay if I start your bootcamp now, or am I too late? Yeah, for sure. So you're definitely not too late. It's definitely okay to start now. It's probably good if you want to, like, here, I can share a link to the YouTube again. The YouTube will have like all the old recordings that you can catch up on. So that's a good place to just like skim through and make sure you're like feeling good about the previous concepts. But honestly, we're still very early, right? We're only like 4 weeks in, something like that. So it's definitely not too late, but thanks for joining us. So let's see. I struggle with Notion. I think I do well for coding, but FigJam helped me better. Can you give me a quick tour of your thought process using Notion? Yeah, for sure. So like, honestly, so my Notion, let's see, let me pull it up. I'm going to share a link in the chat so I can grab the link. Yeah, honestly, like, Notion is one of those things that it's not for everyone. I think I mainly like it because of how it looks. It's like pretty clean and minimal, and it's like fairly flexible. But it's like, I'm only using Notion because it's an easy way for me to host a site like this, right? I just want a really quick way to create a site of like information, like the syllabus and stuff. And Notion was just one of the fastest ways to do that. And, with Figma, like, if I were to put in Figma, well, it's hard to like share that as a link to many people, and like, I don't know, it's just like not as structured. So honestly, I'm not a huge Notion power user. I used to be more of a Notion power user, But yeah, I think as Notion got more complex, I've liked it a little bit less. But for this purpose, like I just wanted a quick website, and Notion was good for that. Yeah. Let's see. Can you give me some pointers on my portfolio? If you have a chance, I build with HTML, CSS. Yeah, definitely. If you're on Discord, feel free to DM me on Discord. That's where I usually do like portfolio reviews, and I can take a look at yours. I am going out of town tomorrow, but if you send it to me like today, I should have some chance to take a look and maybe give you some pointers. So feel free to just DM me on Discord if that works for you. Yeah, thanks everyone for the great feedback. Yeah, I'm glad you guys are hyped. This session I was like a little bit worried about because when I was teaching at Bootcamp and when I was a student at Bootcamps, I remember I was like, when I learned about APIs, I was like, what the heck is an API? So I think the case studies and like showing the example, hopefully that helped make it a lot more clear. But it definitely is exciting. Like it opens the world of like what apps you can build, which is really cool. Have you had any experience doing internal jobs transfer? In my case, I just started a new marketing gig, but I'm hoping to pivot to web dev. An internal transfer. Have I ever done an internal transfer? I don't think I have actually done an internal job transfer before myself. But my experience with seeing other people do it or just have seen friends do it is it really depends on the company. Some companies are very friendly and very supportive of internal jobs transfers. Like Google, Indeed come to mind as companies that like very actively help move people from non-technical roles to technical roles, which kind of sounds like what you're describing. So I would just say this is a very company dependent question. Like some companies aren't flexible to it at all. Some companies are very supportive. So I think that comes down to like maybe checking with your manager or just seeing other people around the company what their experience is. Because yeah, it really depends. What is my name? My name is Zach. Nice to meet you. But yeah, thanks to everyone that came by, and thanks to all the new people that joined. You're definitely not too late. We're still pretty early. We're basically here. We just finished like this JavaScript block right here. So as you can see, there's still a good amount to go through, and starting next week, that's when it's gonna start getting really fast. As if it wasn't fast enough already, but it's definitely going to feel like it's going to lift off pretty starting next week. All right. But yeah, thank you everyone for the kind words. Do let me know if there's any other questions. Okay, so how hard is it to get a job, past interviews, and getting contacts in companies? Oh man. So this is for those who have been at the bootcamp before, I'm gonna give a similar spiel as I usually do. I have to be honest. Right now, in the tech industry, at least, this is the most difficult time to get an entry level job in all my years of being in the tech industry. And I don't mean that as a discouraging statement. I just mean that as like the facts, right? When someone tells you, or you hear about, oh, I got a job in like 3 months or got a job in 6 months. It's most likely that that did not happen to them recently. That was probably the case like a few years ago. But basically, as bootcamps have gotten popular, as CS has gotten more popular as a major, it's been increasingly difficult to land an entry level role. And I don't know if you've been keeping up with like the news about like tech layoffs, but like, you know, there's a lot of company doing tech layoffs right now, right? Like Twitter, like Facebook, like yeah, there's tons of layoffs going on right now. You can actually see 873 tech companies with layoffs, and you can kind of see all the companies doing layoffs here. So it, you know, from a high level perspective, it looks kind of grim, right? It does look harder to get an entry level job. So I just want to put that out first. That being said, it's tech. There's still jobs available. You just have to be like very particular about the way you go about getting a job, because the advice that worked before, I don't think works for everyone. Honestly, it won't work now. I highly recommend, if you're going to try to get a job in 2022 or 2023, you definitely need to kind of work harder than before. I think the other thing is like working smarter. Like there's a reason why I chose this particular suite of technologies in our bootcamp. In my opinion, this is the stack of technologies will give you the best chance of getting hired, especially learning like TypeScript and learning full stack frameworks like Next.js. I have seen that a lot of companies are asking for TypeScript, And a lot of boot camps and CS grads aren't as familiar. So that's an advantage right there. If you know TypeScript and you're familiar with that, that opens you up to a lot more jobs that a lot of the other entry level people won't have. So that's one example of working smarter. The other example of working smarter is being very deliberate with your applying. Everyone who's been at the bootcamp has heard me talk about this before, but basically I used to work at Indeed, the job site, like Indeed.com. And one thing I learned about Indeed is that if you care about a job, like let's say this job right here, like this is a PHP Python job. If I really want to work for this company, I recommend you to never ever apply online. Do not ever hit this button if this is a job you really care about. If this is a job you don't care about, feel free to hit apply. The reason why I say that is because what happens under the hood when you click apply here, like let's say I submit my resume and I click apply, my resume does not go to a recruiter. It goes to a automated screener. It goes to a robot that basically scans my resume and it looks for reasons to disqualify me. So if I don't have any job experience, well, boom, that's an easy disqualification, right? Even though they're asking for entry level, they're gonna obviously choose people that have a little bit more experience than the people who have no experience. So this basically just drops my chance of getting this job of when I click apply to like 0.0001%. Actually, it drops my chance of getting a call from the recruiter to 0.001%. So what happens if you spend all day applying to jobs like this? If you submit like tens of hundreds of applications like this a week, a year, you're not going to get many calls backs, and you're going to get super discouraged. Like it feels like you're working hard, which you are, but a lot of that work is just like being blocked by the screeners. So yeah, like networking is definitely important here. Another strategy that I talk about a lot is getting referrals, because at a lot of tech companies, like at Indeed, for example, when I worked at Indeed, every engineer I referred to Indeed that got hired, I would get paid $5,000 for referring them. So many tech companies do this. This is like referring someone is pretty much always a win-win, right? Like why would I not want to refer people, even if they have like not 100% chance of getting the job, even if they have some chance, well, it's worth a shot, right? Because I might get 5K. So yeah, networking, but also like maybe reaching out to people on LinkedIn or Blind. People are, especially employees at tech companies, you'll find that they're more than willing to give referrals if you're like, not a jerk, basically. So that's a way I would recommend applying smarter. Spend like the first month of your job search getting really good at like technical interviews and apply to jobs you don't care about, because that will give you practice and confidence. And then you spend the second and third months taking what you've learned and applying to the companies you actually care about using the referral method. And that, I think, will give you the best shot of getting a job in this tough market. So let's see. Let me get to Thomas's question. Have you ever done 2 jobs at the same time? Just found about overemployed. I actually did. I actually did do 2 jobs at the same time. At Indeed, I was actually working on another job. Without saying too much, like Indeed and Microsoft, there are certain tech companies where, how do I say this nicely? Like there are certain tech companies that are known for having a more lax culture. Let's say that. These are usually companies that have won. They've already won in their respective field. Like Indeed, Indeed's only competitor is LinkedIn, right? It's like Indeed doesn't have like much competition these days. It's like pretty far ahead. Microsoft doesn't have like much competition these days. Yes, I agree. It is. You have to check with your contract. You have to check with your contract if it's allowed. But at Indeed, moonlighting is, well, it wasn't technically moonlighting because I wasn't working another full-time salary, but it was allowed in my contract. But before I say this, like, be careful. If you do this, make sure that this is legally allowed. For me, I did check that it was like legally allowed for myself. But that's because the other job I took wasn't a full-time salary job. Like, let's say if I was working at Indeed and I took another job at Facebook, that would probably be, I don't know if that's legal actually. I have to check, but there's probably some clause saying I can't do that. But I worked for a side startup, basically, like a small startup, and like I wasn't getting paid. I was getting paid in equity, so that's probably why it was like a lot more legal. But yes, I did learn a lot of what Antonio was saying, which is like 2 jobs at the same time. It was just really tiring. It was just like, even though Indeed wasn't like 40-hour a week thing. It was really tiring, like having to jump back and switch context from Indeed work into like my other startup work. It was, it just ended up being a lot. And I don't know, if, like looking back, was it worth it? I mean, yeah, because it did give me like a lot of good experience, and I do like startups better. But I wouldn't recommend it for most people. But I do see the memes of like people on overemployed who have like 10 jobs and they're just like collecting huge checks. Like I can't imagine that's doable nowadays unless you're just like an insanely good engineer. But yeah, wouldn't recommend it. I would definitely recommend just finding one job that gives you enough satisfaction so you don't have to go looking for another. But yes, do be very careful if you do go about this route. Do check in your contract to see if they allow moonlighting. Another way to actually get noticed as a developer is to build in public a lot. Like I know many people on Twitter that have basically got into web development very new, but what they did was they posted a lot about the projects they built on Twitter. Like they didn't just build something in isolation. They built something and like shared it with people, and so many of those people have gotten jobs very quickly because it's a really effective way to like put yourself out there. It doesn't work for everyone, but if you're consistent at it and like sharing that information online, that is another good approach if you do like Twitter. So someone asked, are you mainly in front end or back end? I don't consider myself front end or back end. I guess I do consider myself full stack. Like when I build apps, I do the entire thing. Like I do the front end, back end, database, like machine learning, all that. I would say I'm a lot better at the front end just because like back end like takes more time to learn. Like some would say I'm not a true back end developer because I don't know like Java or like Scala or any of like the hardcore like lower languages. But no, I've had people say that. Like I've heard people like say like, oh, JavaScript backend developers aren't real, which is like, I mean, I get where that's coming from, but yeah, I'm definitely like more. I think I'm better at the front end stuff, but yeah, I prefer to think of myself as like doing like having expertise on both sides. Am I in a company now? No, actually, I actually started my own company, and actually, this bootcamp is one of the first things that my company is launching. But yeah, the company I'm working at is focusing on using AI for edtech. So we're building a platform that is supposed to help with that. I know I told many people here that that platform is going to be ready, but there were some setbacks. So it should be ready like when I come back from vacation, hopefully. So you guys will all see what we're working on really soon. But before I did that, I used to work at this company, Copy AI. I was like their first like technical person. So I helped them like build their app, and I helped them like train some of their models, do analytics, and all that good stuff. That was fun. It was this company also used the AI models that I was showing you earlier, so that gave me a good background. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's been fun. I definitely enjoy working for myself. Besides the crushing weight of not having a salary, but yeah, it's all good. Oh, you're moving to New York. That's awesome. Congratulations on that. That's definitely a good move. What's the tech scene there like? Yeah, definitely. You're coming from the most tech centered area. I would say one of the good things about New York is that there's not really a big tech scene. I mean, there is a tech scene here, but it's not like the heart and soul of the city, like kind of how it is in SF. But there are so many VCs, engineers, investors, operators, startup founders here. This is probably the only other city that can give SF a run for its money in terms of that like scene. So
that happened within the last like 5 years or so.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
very recent.
yeah, definitely in the last 5 years, a lot more tech people have been moving here. But I like it. Yeah, I don't hang out with a lot of like tech people outside either. But it's nice to know that like if I do want to go to like a meetup or like my company is hosting something, it's usually either in SF or New York. So that's pretty nice. I'm so tired of seeing Notion ads everywhere. Yeah, there are Notion ads all over the subways. I remember there was a subway station. Which one was it? Broadway?
I think it's Times Square.
Times Square? Or maybe it was Times Square. Yeah, it was one of the big subway stations that had like is a whole floor of Notion ads. It was like that's crazy. But yeah, I like New York because it has everything. It's not just all tech. Oops, let me do that. All right, so I think that's about all of the questions. Let me go and scroll through the slides and see if I missed anything. I do need to share the code in Discord. Yeah, I think that's all the questions. All right, got a dinner to prepare for us. I probably will be heading off now, but do let me know if you have any last minute questions. But thank you guys for coming. This is a good session. I was pretty nervous about going in because I didn't want this to be a session where it was super confusing. But it sounds like people are on board, which is good. But yeah, well, I think once you guys start building your own apps with these APIs, it'll even make even more sense. But yeah, for sure. All right, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Keep an eye out on the Discord for the code. I will be sharing this code. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys when we get back on Monday, right? On Monday, we have a Git session. I'll post a reminder about that in the Discord. But once again, if you can't make it, there will be a recording, so no problem. But yeah, thanks you guys for joining, and really appreciate all the new folks that stop by as well. Wait, is the Discord command not working? Let's check. Let me make sure that's still working. Cool. All right, y'all. I will catch y'all later. Have a good night. All right, bye, everyone. I keep waiting to the wrong camera. I keep thinking my camera's here, but it's actually here. All right, take care, y'all. I will see y'all on Monday. I was on cooldown. That makes sense. I was wondering why I was showing up. All right, thanks, everybody. I will see you Monday. Have a good one. Bye.